I personally am a bit curious as to why these accusations, which definitely look like false flags, are coming. The day that the Hunter Biden laptop story was kind of making its way into the headlines and his funding of Ukrainian biolabs. I don't know. It just seems a bit odd to me, the timing of these things. But regardless, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the allegations of Russian war crimes in Bucha. We could start there. I know you've got a lot to say about that. And also the Kramatorsk railway station. I think that the facts and the evidence that we've already seen from that massacre are even more damning for the official Ukrainian narrative than what we've seen come out of Bucha already. And that's partially due to what I think you're going to talk about, the fact that the evidence was destroyed in Bucha. So what are your thoughts on both of these massive war crimes allegations?
Well, let's start off with just this, bring this down to reality. We're in war, or not we, but Russia is fighting Ukraine. There's a war. Both sides employ psychological operations. That's just a reality of war. We have psychological operation battalions, and the other term for psychological operations is propaganda. The idea is to use information as a weapon to shape an environment that's more conducive to, a victorious outcome on your part. It's clear that the Ukrainians know that they are at a military disadvantage. There is a belief that Russia's president, Vladimir Putin, is vulnerable to a domestic backlash that could be generated by one of two things. One, military defeat, excessive casualties, and two, economic sanctions. This has been a gross miscalculation on the part of whoever came up with this idea, because Putin is stronger today, more popular today than he was when the war started. The economic sanctions have backfired. The ruble hasn't collapsed. It's very strong right now. The Russian stock market is alive and well and vibrant. And it appears that Europe's the one taking the big hit economically, and the United States less so, but still, gone shopping recently. You understand what's happened to prices here in the United States. But this propaganda was designed to undermine Russian confidence. And because, it doesn't matter. Lying to America and lying to Europe doesn't do you any good if you're a Ukrainian. You get the cheerleaders. Rachel Maddow and company can sit there and talk about, 13 brave Ukrainian soldiers who never existed, giving a middle finger to a ship that never threatened them, how they could change the outcome of the war. It was 83 Marines who surrendered rather than die. And they were treated well, by the way. We can talk about the ghost of Kiev, flying around, this wonderful pilot, a modern-day version of Baron von Richthofen, shooting down everything that flew against him. Total fiction, didn't happen. We can talk about Zelensky's statement, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition. He never said it. He didn't, it was simply put out there by an unnamed U.S. intelligence official from the U.S. Embassy in Kiev. So this is all part of this psychological operation, which is normal. Fine. Where it becomes a problem is when you seek to deny criminal activity done by your forces and shift blame onto others. Now it's no longer simply psychological warfare. You're talking about covering up a crime, and that's a war crime. That's a violation of international humanitarian law. And we have a situation we've heard the Ukrainians talk about, the Russians doing this, the Russians doing that. In fact, all the evidence that comes out of Ukraine, however, is the Ukrainians doing that. They seem to be very proud of their ability to post on social media the rapes, abuse, and murders of Russian soldiers and innocent Ukrainian civilians, especially Russian-speaking civilians. But suddenly we got this videotape that showed Ukrainian National Police rolling down a main street in Bucha, a town north of Kiev that had been occupied by Russia for a period of several weeks in March. Russian troops left on March 30th. And these troops are rolling down, and the video was put out on April 2nd. I'm not sure if it shows events of the 2nd or the 1st, but it shows bodies in the street. And suddenly the narrative immediately became that these bodies represent Ukrainian civilians murdered by the Russians. Now, the Russians immediately said, when we left on March 30th, weren't any bodies. We didn't murder anybody. And the Ukrainians had a hard time disproving that. But then the New York Times came out with this front page story using civilian commercial satellite imagery that showed bodies in the street on March 19th. What's interesting about that, and I don't want to get too gruesome here, but I've dealt with dead bodies. I've dealt with dead bodies that have been outside for a long time. Let's just say that they don't look like what they look like on the videotape. They have a tendency to discolor, to bloat, to burst, and then liquefied organs tend to create a puddle of noxious fluid that surrounds the body. None of those bodies exhibited that, which is proof positive that whatever the New York Times claimed was on the ground on March 19th, it wasn't those bodies. Those bodies were reflected, bodies that had been killed probably within 24 hours of being discovered. The other thing, too, is that an assessment of the New York Times satellite imagery by people who are forensically specialists in this appears to show that the image was actually taken midday on April 1st. And so the New York Times is just smoking dope and publishing nonsense at this point in time. But the other thing is, when we take a look at the available forensic evidence, we have the bodies. The bodies show people who are either wearing a white armband or have their hands bound by the material that others are using as a white armband, suggesting that the armband had been removed and that they had been bound this way. Many of the bodies are co-located with Russian military ration packs, green boxes, White Star, Voyentor military store on them. The Russians are on record saying that, we brought in 400,000 tons of food that was disseminated, and that they also traded their dry rations, these ration packs, for dairy products with the local population. Now, we need to understand, in this nationalist-dominated Ukrainian government, the act of trading dairy products for dry goods constitutes collaboration. And that's an important term, because what we have is we have these dead bodies that appear to have died somewhere around April 1st. On April 1st, we have a Ukrainian politician broadcasting to her constituents using social media and local television for the people to stay inside. A cleansing operation is underway. Don't panic. Stay inside. Now, don't panic means you're probably going to hear some shooting. But, that's an assumption on my part. But, stay inside. A cleansing operation, that's an important term, and don't panic. At the same time, the Ukrainian National Police post on their website a declaration that in Bucha, they're carrying out a cleansing operation, again, that term, and the cleansing operation's purpose is to liquidate Russian collaborators, another term, and Russian saboteurs, meaning people wearing civilian clothes who they believe to be have a military purpose. And then we have videotape that are published by, again, an Azov battalion, that is the right-wing neo-Nazi militant extension of the right-wing neo-Nazi ideology. They have a unit that is attached to the Russian National Police, or the Ukrainian National Police, who issues a video where in it you see one of the soldiers say, hey, they're now wearing the blue being blue armband, signifying a loyalty to Ukraine, and I shoot them. And the person in charge says yes. He said something else, but he said yes, and they shoot. So you put that together and you're going, it's not looking too good for the Ukrainians. And then you start to get other things, such as terminology used by Ukrainian politicians. It was a safari, they said, safari, out there to shoot down the civilians like they were animals. But the curious thing about that term, safari, is the name of the Ukrainian National Police unit that was sent to Bucha to carry out the cleansing operation was the Safari unit. It's just curious that they use that term there. Now we have some other evidence that's come out. The Germans have published these or released these audio tapes of alleged radio intercepts. Now, I've done this for a living, intercepted communications and radio communication. Most radios are push to talk. So if you and I are talking, I have to push. When I push, you can't talk. You're on receive mode only. And I speak, and when I'm done, I usually say over. That means over to you. I let go. You pick up, push to talk, speak back. But the conversations that are released by the Germans, have people talking over each other in the clear. So you know right off the bat it's not push to talk, which means it's not a military tactical radio, which means it's probably a cell phone. And so they're involved in a cell because, you know, if you and I are on the cell phone, we can talk over each other. If someone's recording that call, that's how it's going to come out. So it's a cell phone, which means it's not the Russians, because the Russians lined up all their soldiers before they went into Ukraine and removed all personal electronic devices because operational security dictates you don't give the enemy any notice of where you are. So you don't use a cell phone to call home to mom, so the enemy can, geolocate that and put artillery around that. So the Russians don't have cell phones; they're not using cell phones. And also, I've had the dogs. I warned you about. I've had linguists who are better than me listen to the tape, and you know, a Ukrainian speaking Russian is different than a Russian speaking Russian. And this individual said clearly, these are Ukrainians speaking Russian. So what we have here, again, is an effort by the Ukrainian government to create an image that has the Russians committing a crime that they know they committed. That's just the reality of the situation. We need an independent, professional investigation of this crime. I will withhold final judgment until that is done. But if you asked me as a forensic investigations expert, which I am, to evaluate at face value the available data, the data would tell me that we're looking at most likely pro-Russian Ukrainians who have been killed, that the evidence points to Ukrainians operating in Bucha at the time these corpses appeared, conducting a cleansing operation against Russian collaborators, and that there has been a concerted effort by the Ukrainian government and its allies to artificially manufacture a narrative that shifts blame for these murders onto Russia.